Welcome to Sir John A. Macdonald's 200th birthday party. Bienvenue au 200e anniversaire de Sir John A. Macdonald. 215 est une année remplie d'anniversaires qui vont droit au cœur de ce qu'est le Canada, de qui nous sommes en tant que Canadiens et de ce que nous représentons dans le monde. 800 years ago, the Magna Carta was signed by King John, a document that has profoundly influenced our understandings of the rule of law, the Constitution, and the rights and liberties of citizens throughout the world. And by the way, one of the 4 surviving copies of the Magna Carta will be on display in this very building in a few months' time. 100 years ago, Canadians were fighting valiantly in the Battle of Ypres in the First World War, a conflict that was instrumental in the emergence of a distinctive Canadian identity. 50 years ago, the red and white maple leaf flew proudly for the first time over the Peace Tower, which we can see so clearly across the river from this magnificent venue. And finally, if you'll excuse my mentioning it, it's the 5th anniversary of my organization, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. That's a theme to which I will return in a moment. But as important as these anniversaries are, none of them can overshadow in importance the contribution of Sir John A. Macdonald to Canada's ascent from what Voltaire so dismissively called quelques arpents de neige to what is, by almost any measure, one of the leading countries in the world. Those who think that Sir John's legacy is a few statues around the country and a poor likeness on the $10 bill do not understand that the very warp and weft of this country are made up of threads drawn from this man's strategic and tactical genius. Out of the unpromising materials of thinly populated and mutually antagonistic British colonies, unloved by London, coveted by Washington, riven by racial and linguistic disputes, he distilled the ideas, the politics, and the institutions that today place us at the forefront of the nations of the world. We are his legacy, and he lives on in us. In his magisterial new History of Canada, Conrad Black does not exaggerate when he asserts that had Canada not been so small at the outset, Macdonald's feat would have undoubtedly won him the acclaim that history accords to the other great statesmen of the 19th century: Lincoln, Palmerston, Disraeli, Gladstone, Salisbury, Cavour, and Bismarck. There is still time for history to be revised. Much as he admired the United States and its founder's vision, and he carried, by the way, his copy of the Federalist Papers with him to the conferences that led to Confederation, he saw the weaknesses of their creation, not least in the sanguinary civil war that had just racked the Great Republic. Chief amongst those defects was a constitution that gave too much power to the states and too little to the federal government, with the result that the center could not hold except through armed conflict. To make a nation out of British North Americans, therefore, he knew that he had to create for them the instruments of nationhood and not merely project into the future the local and parochial interests of the individual colonies. Accordingly, he defended the idea of a powerful national government and parliament that would represent and unite all Canadians and be the instrument of the construction of a national consciousness, a national pride and national action. He had to compromise and accept the creation of provinces independent of Ottawa, but if you read the actual text of what I still call the British North America Act, subsequently and prosaically renamed the Constitution Act 1867, he clearly won his point, and Ottawa was intended to be by far the more powerful agent of Canadians' political will. Again, you can see the concrete manifestation of his labors out the window this evening across the river. Many forces have watered down Sir John's wine, but even in that insipid tipple, you can still detect the full-bodied flavor that fueled this man and his vision, to employ a metaphor that the great man would have enjoyed. And speaking of tipples and Sir John A.'s vision for Canada, I draw your attention to the fact that on the 200th anniversary of his birth, in the country he founded to tear down the barriers that separate Canadians, we still could not serve to you tonight this beer named in his honor, Old Tomorrow, because we were not allowed to bring it across the bridge to serve in Quebec. So arrest me. So believe me when I say that Sir John's work remains half done. And those politicians who have known how to tap into Canadians' desire to rise above petty regional squabbles and articulate what Canada could be if it transcended parochialism have often found themselves richly rewarded. This, too, is one of Macdonald's lurking legacies. But there was more. There was more. He didn't just want a nation. He wanted a nation that would preserve and promote a way of life that he believed had proven its superiority over all others. That meant embracing a society of freedom. Peace, order, and good government are not boring and uninspiring. They are the wellsprings of progress. The Constitution, similar in principle to that of the United Kingdom promised in the British North America Act, was one based on the freedom of the individual, limited government, an independent judiciary, the rule of law, and a powerful civil society. A society that Sir John knew reached all the way back to the Magna Carta and beyond in an unbroken chain of custody which he and we have inherited. Those who think, please. Those who think that the Charter of Rights, however important a document it is, introduced rights into Canada, fail to grasp how deeply infused our founding institutions were with those values, thanks in large part to Macdonald. Now, it's perhaps inevitable that the passage of time dims the appreciation of even the most prodigious feats. And it is therefore fitting that we should turn for a moment to Sir John's contemporaries for a just appreciation of the scale of the triumph that was Confederation, achieved under his leadership. He was the embodiment of the proposition that Canada is much more than mere partisan contention over petty issues. His party was aptly named the Liberal Conservative Party. And in pursuit of his vision of a pan-colonial nation in British North America, he brought into his coalition French speakers and English speakers, including his indispensable partner, Sir Georges-Étienne Cartier, Protestants and Catholics, recent arrivals, and Canadiens de vieille souche. Perhaps most impressively, he brought in George Brown, one of the towering founding figures of the Reform and later the Liberal parties. And having brought this finest flowering of the diverse colonies together, he alternately whipped and cajoled, urged and pleaded, bullied and conciliated until they delivered the new nation. Même ceux qui ont fini par s'opposer à Sir John A. du point de vue politique, alors que la politique chez nous s'est normalisée après une période d'unité inhabituelle autour de la Confédération, même ceux étaient conscients que dans sa présence prédominante, dans sa génie politique et dans sa capacité inouïe de communiquer une vision d'un Canada qui n'existait que dans son imaginaire. Sans tout ça, le Canada qu'ils avaient débattu avec tant d'ardeur n'aurait jamais vu le jour. It is thus fitting that the final word from me this evening on Sir John's legacy should come to us from Sir Wilfrid-Laurier's eulogy delivered in the House of Commons. Quant à moi, je puis dire en toute vérité que sa perte m'accable, tout comme elle accable ce Parlement. C'est comme si l'une de nos institutions nationales s'était effondrée. Sir John Macdonald appartient maintenant à l'histoire. Et l'on peut affirmer en toute certitude que la carrière sur laquelle on vient de tourner la page s'avérera l'une des plus remarquables de ce siècle. And he continued, Sir Wilfrid, in his eulogy in the House of Commons, it would be premature at this time to attempt to anticipate what will be the final judgment of history upon him. But there were in his career and in his life features so prominent that already they shine with a glow which time cannot alter. It can be asserted that in the supreme art of governing men, Sir John Macdonald was gifted as few men in any land or in any age were gifted. The fact that during all those years he retained unimpaired not only the confidence, but the ardent devotion and affection of his party is evidence that besides those higher qualities of statesmanship to which we were the daily witness, he was also endowed with those inner, subtle, undefinable graces of soul which win and keep the hearts of men. As to his statesmanship, it is written in the history of Canada. It may be said, without any exaggeration, that the life of Sir John A. Macdonald, from the date he entered Parliament, is the history of Canada. Now, having invoked both of our Institute's namesakes, Macdonald and Laurier, I'll trespass no more upon the panel which will discuss later this evening the theme of Sir John A. Macdonald's legacy to Canada. But I will take a moment to speak to you about the institute that has brought you together this evening. The Macdonald-Laurier Institute, as I've already remarked, is devoted to the proposition that there is a Canadian political tradition whose greatness transcends the mere squabbles of partisan politics, that we have created together a country that is the envy of the world, but whose greatness is not completed, for it remains under construction. We founded the Institute 5 years ago to create here in the nation's capital a powerful voice for national public policy equal to Canada's potential. In this, our 5th anniversary year, I am proud to report that in 2011, we won the Sir Anthony Fisher International Award, the big international award for think tank books, for our first book, The Canadian Century. The next year, we won a Templeton Foundation Prize for outstanding achievement by a young think tank, and the International Think Tank Rankings from the University of Pennsylvania ranked us as one of the top 3 new think tanks in the world. And this year, those same rankings put us as the #1 think tank in Ottawa. Five present and former Prime Ministers of Canada have cited our work, and when British Prime Minister David Cameron addressed the Canadian Parliament, he started his speech by quoting from our book, The Canadian Century. Thank you for being here to celebrate with us this milestone in the Institute's life.